chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff urges caution on a plan to split up the National Security Agency and U.S. Cyber Command. Defense One reports General Mark Milley says the signals intelligence from the NSA is among the most valuable pieces of intelligence the military gets every day. Milley says splitting the two now might slow the information channels. Ron Marks is president of ZPN National Security and Cyber Strategies, former CIA official and former intelligence advisor to two Senate majority leaders. Ron, thanks very much for coming on the program. The word that General Milley used that I thought was most striking here was now. Sounds like he's not opposed to the idea of splitting NSA and Cyber Command eventually, but now's not the time. Am I hearing him correctly, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. My first reaction when I heard this is, we need two more stovepipes like we need a hole in our head. I mean, if we already look in terms of cyber world like sort of a 19th century Victorian roofline. But I think he's carrying on what has been a discussion since 2017 through the creation of all of this, which is, are these two compatible in the sense of are they taking resources away from one another? If I'm him at this point and I'm dealing with a Biden administration, which thanks to both SolarWinds and this Microsoft break within the last few days, they're going to be doing a full review at this point. Part of it is obviously looking at, what offensive capability, but where was the fence line here? And how do these guys get into the fence line? So I think there are some questions both domestically and on the borders that we need to answer. So, yeah, I agree with him. I think it's a little premature right now to give any consideration to that.
So one of the things that you taught me a long time ago, Ron, is always follow the money. And if you used the phrase a moment ago, these organizations, one might be taking resources away from one another. If the money's separate, they're already stovepiped, aren't they?
Yeah, very much so. Well, they're stovepipe in the sense of where the monies are coming from. You can buy individuals, actually buy multiple kinds of program money. So that's not impossible. You can buy programs with multiple program money. That's also not impossible. But then again, you are dealing with two separate sources of money. You're going to deal with one that's coming out of the DNI. You're going to have one that's coming out of DOD. They do crosshatch with each other. They actually do a pretty decent job at that level. But yeah, it introduces one more step of at least a budgetary pain that you don't want to deal with.
Patrick Tucker in Defense One, the piece I referenced earlier, writes this: under a dual hat arrangement, one person serves as the head of both Cyber Command and of the NSA. Is that maybe the issue here? Is that a potential partial solution, is to do away with the dual hat but keep the rest of the construct?
Yeah, I think that's exaggerated to some extent. I mean, on a daily basis, you have chief operating officers effectively under Nakasone dealing with individual issues in terms of both of them. Does it take attention away? I really don't think so. I mean, the missions are so complementary at this point. The NSA, the older NSA guys are concerned about SIGINT and whether or not we're really losing on that, but I don't hear a lot of grumbling in that area, so it sounds like we're doing reasonably well. What NSA has become for Cyber Command is really in a lot of ways the modern version of probably what we really need, which is this artificial separation between intelligence and operators in the cyber field and law enforcement, in the defense and military end. This is not Sherman Kent and national security policy being separated from the analysts. These guys need to have close order support. In the case of NSA developing tools, helping with the targeting, giving some additional insights into what's going on out there, which has really strengthened and helped Cyber Command. I just think that separating them, it's a bureaucrat's delight. I understand what they're talking about in terms of concerns on duplication and all the rest of it, but I just don't see it right now. And frankly, unless there was some kind of major follow-up in terms of SolarWinds and the Microsoft break-in, I would really be loath to break them up right now. I think they're a good complement with each other. In fact, if anything, I think they serve as a model for the future.
And given that, and you're using your words right now a moment ago, the sentiment, at least, that I took from General Milley's comments, is it time to maybe think about just leaving it alone, at least for the foreseeable future? Continuing to touch stuff seems to be the biggest challenge in the Defense Department.
I only have to turn you to the domestic side to show what a mess that is. The fact is that CISA at this point is beginning to gain some control, but you have multiple players from Commerce to FCC to SEC to DHS to FBI all playing in the domestic sector. And frankly, the coordination is tough because no one's really called the shot in it. I would point to the 2020 election. I think when you did give CISA the lead, you were able to put a cross-organizational group together. They did a very effective job, and I think that is the way of thinking about the future. We got a town full of lawyers. I'm actually married to one. And what I will say to you is that they tend to think in terms of titles and U.S. code. We have Title 10 and Title 50 and Title 6 for Homeland Security, and that's not the way the world in the 21st century operates. You know, the law is a breathing entity, and it has to think about what is effective against these various challenges we have. Title 10 and Title 50 are a function of 1947. Title 6 for Homeland Security is a function of 2001. These problems exist, but other problems have mounted on them, and inside and outside our borders now in ways that we haven't experienced before, except perhaps terrorism. And we need to come to grips with this. This is too much. The system no longer works. When you see this kind of disruption and constant failure, this isn't about stupid people. These are about people who are trying very hard to work with a system that no longer reflects the underlying facts of the situation. And I think it's about time that we stand back a little bit and think about coordination and not separation of these kinds of entities.
Ron Marks, thanks very much as always. Great to have you back in the program.
Thank you, Francis. Delighted to be here.